All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. I know it's been a long time since you've seen us, but hey, we had to come back and continue this conversation. And I'm back again with Ian Schlakman, former Green Party presidential candidate, and Justin. Justin, what's your last name?
It's Beth.
Beck. Justin Beck, a
Beth.
representative who's worked with the presidential. Say the thing the thing that you said
Yeah.
earlier.
So it's Justin Beth, Beth.
Mm-hmm. And you
Is my last name, and
and you work with the
President
presidential.
Campaign Support Committee, the
Got you.
PCSC.
Man, that's a mouthful. Okay. So because Ian did get to open the floor, obviously for 30 minutes, I want to now give you an opportunity to take, rebut a point that Ian made that you might have disagreed with.
Well, so yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for your show, and I want to thank Ian also for raising some of these issues. Can you hear me all right? By the way,
Yeah, I can hear
my
you perfectly.
okay. Um, and very valid concerns that Ian has had. And I will be the first to admit that the Presidential Campaign Support Committee maybe has not done all it could have for all of the candidates. But I definitely like to maybe share some perspective of the PCSC to some of the issues that Ian has raised. And In particular, let's just talk about for a second this idea of official recognition. Um, Official recognition does not disqualify from somebody being on a state's party's ballots. It is just a recommendation from the Presidential Campaign Support Committee to the state parties to say these are the candidates that have met the basic criteria to be considered official,
Okay.
right? That's all it is. It doesn't say like who can and cannot be on the ballot. It and so as far as like the other candidates that are in the running, we actually do have a website. If you would go to the and I tried to share those links. It's the gpus.org
Okay.
website for the Presidential Campaign Support Committee,
Okay.
and there's a link to a Google document which lists all of the officially recognized candidates, which there are three, and it will also show the currently active candidates that are not officially recognized, that are five currently.
Okay.
So,
But have those
um,
rules. So my question would be, um, are the rules seem changing and as malleable as the other candidates, including one that I've talked to personally who's still in the race? Are those rules as malleable as they've claimed they are?
so one thing I would say to that is, we have said, okay, well, what is the basic criteria to be considered an active candidate? And so there's actually four areas of candidates, right? There's known candidates, where
Okay.
people that have like maybe expressed a little interest,
Okay.
um, and they maybe have said a letter of intent.
Okay.
But we say for them to be an active candidate, they need to actually have filed an FEC Form 1 and Form 2,
Okay.
formed a campaign committee essentially. They need to have also filled out a questionnaire, a candidate questionnaire. So with those three things, a letter of interest, uh, um, FEC filing, and filling out the questionnaire, and they can be considered an active candidate, and they would be put on that active candidates list, right? We recently had four additional people send in letters of interest, but not do the other parts of that process. So they were not included onto the list. So, I mean, we have been fairly consistent. Now, there have been a couple times when certain candidates have done some very disturbing behavior, right? And
Yeah, I heard about the fight.
well, there was the fight, but there were other things. There's a candidate that was potentially, displaying stalking type behaviors. So we
Okay.
actually had to take an action as a committee to say, does this person, should they still be on our active candidates list if they've been expressing stalking type behavior towards another person? We caught wind of that. So, um, you know,
So my question would
yeah.
be for that situation. I don't know that particular situation, but isn't that a little bit paternalistic? Because shouldn't the voter, if there was if there was something filed with the police department and things like that, and of course if there's some legal reason why you should, that's a different discussion, of course. But I mean, if he's an active candidate and he fulfilled the requirements, shouldn't that be left up to the voter to make the decision of to whether or not they want to support them?
So, I mean, it did come up to a vote on the Presidential Campaign Support Committee, as to whether or not, and it was, decided by the entire committee. It was not just the co-chairs of the committee making that decision, right? And there were many women on the committee that felt that that was a reasonable justification to remove this candidate from the list, and they felt a little traumatized by it. So,
okay.
Yeah,
I just feel like that's and Ian, I'll let you respond. I just
feel
like that's really paternalistic. I don't know, because I don't know the situation, and I'm not saying that the women could have felt safe, but like removing him as an active candidate isn't going to make him less of a stalker. I feel like maybe he just got beat at the ballot box.
It was a very tough decision.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Ian. I'd like for you to respond.
Well, I guess one of the big things that strikes me about it is Justin. When did you join the PCSC?
Baby.
November, October.
Say that one more time.
November or October of 2018.
Got you.
And so I was a member on the committee for some time. And then, yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because you and I have talked privately quite a couple times, and I'm just a little surprised that you didn't take some of my concerns directly to the PCSC, or if you did, you didn't really tell me about it. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, the most two big egregious ones are, if you were on the PCSC in early 2018, then you saw the same thing that I saw, the same thing that Dario Hunter commented on. I have the email, which was the letter from Andrea Merida representing the Hawkins campaign, basically saying these are the rules that we're going to use for the whole PCSC. And there was a little bit of pushback inside the PCSC. I'll give you all a little credit. Some of those requirements were lowered a little bit. But ultimately, a candidate like myself, who's running to say we need to focus on down-ticket candidates, not put myself as the great presidential candidate, it was a personal attack, I personally feel, when you all let the Hawkins team write the rules. And now every candidate has to function like the Hawkins team is functioning. And I mean, other PCSC members have talked about this, spoken up about it, and I haven't heard you really speak up about it. I'd like you to say something about it if you could.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked me that question, Ian, because I heard this on the Primo Nutmeg interview as well. So let me explain why you would think that the letter from Andrea shaped exactly what came out from the PCSC. Okay, so at the time that I joined the PCSC, which is again November of 2018, we were working on finalizing Article 10 requirements for official recognition, right? And that had all these kind of lower criteria for donations and for signature threshold. Also on that committee at that time was Kevin Zeese and Michael Feinstein. They left not long after I joined the committee. But what happened is Kevin Zeese probably took what we had created for Article 10, right? And Michael Feinstein and Kevin Zeese had some objections to it, basically in the low thresholds for money raising, right? They want to increase the money raising. In fact, we get attacked on that all the time, saying that we have very low criteria to qualify for official recognition based on they only need to raise $1,000, right? $10, 100 individual $10 donations, right? So that's the minimum threshold of donations. And Kevin Zeese and Andrea and Michael Feinstein wanted a higher limit, right? So they basically they cut and paste what we had for Article 10. They changed the limits for donations and signatures or whatever. I can't remember exactly what the letter, how it came out, but there were higher criteria. And we actually pushed back on it, right?
One of you has your volume up a little bit too high. It's like a little echo, slight one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So, so does that make sense that, Kevin Zeese basically took the language we had, right, that we were working on, that was in draft. And he basically, the letter that came out from Andrea had the higher criteria. And we basically, we were already working on that version. So that's why they look so similar. But And
It doesn't make any sense because I mean, what we saw from Andrea clearly came from the Hawkins team, and on top of that, we also saw requirements in there about ballot access. So now the Hawkins team is dictating how other candidates have to address the issue of ballot access. I don't understand why that wasn't removed from the PCSC's language, and I also don't understand why the PCSC wasn't more honest about the fact that the Hawkins team was so involved.
So again, the letter that Andrea came out with for the Hawkins team was using what Kevin Cease had from the time he was on the PCSC. That's why the language was so similar.
So real quick. Real quick, and I don't mean to interrupt, but so there seems to be a clear conflict of interest here from the beginning, because at least Kevin Cease is now literally on Howie Hawkins' campaign team, right? So he left the PCSC and ended up on Howie Hawkins' team. And so do you see why people like Ian and Dario and others could believe that there's some, at least, I don't want to say nefarious as in like they're trying to screw the Green Party, but at least nefarious as far as some type of attempt to coalesce and even potentially bend the rules so it could favor Howie? Because at that point, if these people were clearly trying to raise the threshold, which would benefit no one but Howie, because relatively everyone else who was running was not really known at the time, then they go to Howie's campaign. Do you understand why a lot of these candidates feel that there was some type of maneuver, like joint maneuver, to kind of tip the scales in favor of Howie Hawkins?
Of course, I understand that. And we actually on the Presidential Campaign Support Committee, we do have a conflict of interest policy. Unfortunately, that is not a policy that is shared across the other committees, including the Green Party of the United States Steering Committee does not have a conflict of interest policy right now. That's something that's bothered me quite a bit, something I've actually kind of fought for. But, we also get a lot of pushback. And so I think that is probably more of a problem, that we don't have a conflict of interest policy on all of our committees across the board, right? It's something I've tried to work towards, but again, also gotten resistance from.
Okay. Ian, I think you have the volume a little bit high, because I keep hearing...
I have a headset on, but I might. It's possible.
Yeah, we keep hearing a little feedback, but we're not sure where it's coming from. But
I'll go grab some earbuds too. So I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. So So Ian, do you want to respond real quick?
Well, one of the things that I think is a little ridiculous is the notion that we have monetary requirements at all. There's no state that I know of, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, that has monetary requirements to be on the ballot. I think that is an affront to democracy on its face. And I can kind of show you, how it is, too. Because the Green Party, I think, through Justin's own admission, is trying to kind of save face by not having the wrong type of candidate on the ballot. Now, if you look at the Libertarian Party, their highest ranking party, their highest polling member right now, the one that's most likely to win the nomination, is Vermin Supreme, the guy with the boot on his head.
I met Vermin Supreme. Hey, Ian, man, look, be nice to Vermin, man. I met Vermin. He's a cool guy. Okay?
Vermin Supreme just retweeted me the other day, so shout out to Vermin Supreme. And I'm sure this enrages the proper suit and tie candidates of the Libertarian Party, but they know that if they were to have criteria that said you have to raise X amount of dollars or you can't have a boot on your head, that they would be anti-democratic. Why doesn't the Green Party fundamentally understand that? If I want to spend this election using my own money to drive around the country telling people about down ticket candidates on the Green Party ballot line and focusing on winning down ticket races, not raising money for my own race, why am I not allowed to do that? Why is there a minimum threshold at all? And I keep
go ahead.
I keep explaining this to the Green Party people over and over again. When I was in it, there were 7 candidates total. 7 candidates that all wanted to be on the ballot. Why are we emulating the failed Democratic policies, the failed Democratic Party, which has this distributed system from national to the locals, to the states rather? Why don't we just have one ballot where we say every single person is on there, every Green nationally, sign up to be a Green and get a ballot by this date. We get that one date where we get everyone signed up, hand them one ballot, everyone's on it, you do ranked choice voting, and boom, you're done, you got your candidate. Why do we put ourselves in this mess It only benefits certain people that have those inside connections for decades on the state level. And this is something that Justin and I have talked about before, because even if you minimize the requirements for signatures or for money, you're still going to get nefarious greens like North Carolina that are going to take that moment in time where Hawkins raised a little bit more than Dario, Hawkins has a little bit more signatures than Dario, and boom, North Carolina only has one candidate on the ballot, and they've justified it through the Green Party's own mechanism of signatures and money raising.
So let me just speak as a person who's independent of both of these parties, right? And what it looks like and what people will likely say. So Justin and Ian, I'm sure you'd both agree that the best thing for the Green Party right now would be to achieve that 5% margin in the general election. But in order for them to achieve that, they have to basically appear diametrically different than the Democratic Party and Republican parties. But when the Democratic and Republican parties are either to the left of you on the way you're going about your business, or at least more liberal about how they're going about their business, they're, for example, you don't have to have a certain amount of money raised to get on the ballot. In some states, you have to have a certain amount of signatures, but some would even call that anti-democratic, especially because it's completely unnecessary for a literal Democratic primary. This isn't the general election we're talking about. And so if I'm a person who is outside of the Green Party and I'm hearing that, wow, so for their primary, they're voting at some presidential committee to take people off the ballot without actually talking to the Green Party members about how they feel about it, like not the committee, but the actual members who are going to be affected by these outcomes. Because now, if I'm a person who maybe I don't like another candidate, right? And I'm like, you know what? I saw what they did to this particular candidate. He was accused of stalking. Not saying that he was guilty or not guilty. That's not what I'm saying. But all I have to say now is, hey, that person was doing some pretty nefarious stuff behind the scenes. Maybe we should vote to get them taken off the committee. And now if I have the power, I can, make sure that certain people are on the committee to make sure the vote goes in the way that benefits me the most. And so you see why that can be a slippery slope overall, and people would perceive that as anti-democratic, right? Justin,
So again, in the case of the one person there that we removed, I mean, that was a very tough call for the committee. And that's the only person we removed from the active candidates list. And again, once you're an active candidate, I've been encouraging that all state parties include all of our candidates personally, okay. Right? Now,
which is good. Thank you very much for that.
And the minimum, right? They should have at least all of the officially recognized candidates at a minimum, right? So the actions of Georgia, right? I disagreed with. Now, I would also say that there is a question of decentralization, right? Ian talked to having one like kind of nationwide ballot for the Green Party, okay. And that also is somewhat problematic because different states have different mechanisms of assigning their delegates.
But my thing is,
some states have a primary, some states have a caucuses, and so I mean, just in the very nature of the laws of a state, we might not be able to have a nationwide ballot of the Green Party.
Well, so here's my that's a completely different thing. If a law of a state prevents it, that's one thing, right? But at the same time, when you have a situation where there might be someone's rights being infringed upon, that's the one time it's okay to use some type of centralized power to maintain liberty. Does that make sense? I get what you're saying about decentralization. I'm all for decentralization, but I'm also a proponent of like the only time that a centralized a centralized entity should jump in is to maintain liberty.
So I'm not exactly sure what you meant by that.
So if some people are being kept off the ballot because of one Green Party for one particular state decided to alter their rules, and by the way, once again, you still have to take into account that all these people have special interests potentially, so they may be changing the rules not because it's the right thing to do, not because the state is telling them, but because it benefits the candidate of their choice. Because I'm just speaking as somebody who's seen the DNC do this. So What? So
again,
the one time I know you spoke of decentralization and allowing the states to do what they do, but I feel like the one time that the whole point of a committee like this is to say, look, I know how y'all do things, but if that's going to prevent someone from exercising their rights to run in a primary where they have a legitimate chance to win, if they fulfill the basic criteria with the national party, then you will absolutely recognize them on that ballot come election time.
And I agree with that. I agree that. So and let's just be clear here, right? The recognized candidates, the officially recognized candidates, and the active candidates are all allowed to be on the ballot. And the PCSC has no say over any of the candidates that are on the ballot for that state. It's the state making the decision. We provide.
But y'all said y'all took somebody off of the active candidates list. That doesn't affect their ballot access at all.
Well, so he could actually still be on the ballot.
Okay.
He could actually still be on the ballot, right? Just because we're not listing them as an active candidate does not preclude them from being on the ballot. And that is up to that state. And they could put whoever else they want on the ballot. But the officially recognized candidates is a recommendation.
Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying, Justin, and I get it. But the problem is that I've been trying to explain to the more moderate Greens, let's just be frank with you, you are not on the good side of the Hawkins team. They've identified me personally to you as someone that you do not like. But that by using these metrics at all, they other nefarious actors are then using that as an excuse to kick other people off the ballot. If there was no national signature requirement, if there was no national money requirement, how could North Carolina say how he didn't, Dario didn't collect enough signatures just to get him off the ballot? They couldn't. They couldn't do it. They'd have to make their own signature mechanism, and then we would scold them individually for it. But since National is sort of silently endorsing this, National silently kind of endorsing this process by making your own signature requirements. And I really have to take issue with it too. GPUS.org is the party's internal website. GP.org is our official website. It's where people go. They know us. They know that two-letter party extension, GP.org. You took the candidates off of GP.org. They're gone. So effectively, to try to find out they exist anymore, you'd have to do something. You can't just quickly learn, who are the candidates? Who should I vote for? As burners are leaving and Tulsiites are leaving the Democratic Party, they want to know that their opinions are going to be honored in the Green Party.
Ian, really quick, we're called toll cells. We're called toll cells, okay? Get it correct. Get it right, okay? But I do want to. So Justin, I would like for you to address this. So this was sent to me anonymously. This was addressed. I want to say this because I feel like it's kind of important, and it honestly kind of supports what Ian is saying. It says 3.2, identifying the more successful candidates. Apparently, it's from the Green Party. The Green Party wants to focus the attention of voters on the more capable and prepared candidates who are demonstrating an ability to win support of Green Party voters. The candidates should also be able to demonstrate the ability to run successful campaigns in 40 or more states. Candidates who fail to generate enthusiasm and support will naturally fall by the wayside, and it's not the responsibility of the Green Party to keep their campaigns going. But yeah, so if that's somebody's official position, because that was copy and pasted. So if that's somebody's within the party's official position, that's a little problematic. And I feel like if for you, like, because you're a member of this committee, I feel like it might even be the responsibility of a member of that committee to like actively and openly challenge this, because what it looks like once again, as a person who's outside of all this, who knows that you all need 5% to increase your viability going forward, I feel like there should be as much transparency as possible here. And if there's somebody, if they're going to take this as the official, people are going to take this as the official position of the Green Party. So you can come and give us the nuance. People aren't going to pay attention to that nuance. They're going to see, okay, this is undemocratic. I'm not going to leave the Democratic Party to go into this party who's just as bad.
Can I respond?
The PCSC wrote it. So Justin should respond. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't have that in front of me right now. But what that was basically describing is that, so we have an official recognition process to kind of say these candidates are showing the capability of running a nationwide campaign. And that was the whole point, right? That's why we made so going back to Georgia, Georgia actually increased those requirements on their own outside of the PCSC, and they barred Dario from appearing on the ballot. We could not control them, right? I think that should be something that the GPUS, we should actually say as a minimum, if they're officially recognized by GPUS, they should be on the ballot. The Green Party of Georgia, again, changed the criteria on their own, right? Their own personal criteria, right? They said, well, we're going to take what the coordinated or the Presidential Campaign Support Committee did, but we're going to do the higher requirements that we think they should have. So that was entirely their decision, the Georgia Green Party, right? Again, I have a huge problem with that. But again, it's not up to the Green Party of the United States to say, okay, you want to run a campaign, we're gonna whoever this person is, we're gonna help you out doing everything so you can run your campaign. We need people to be empowered to run their own campaign and show that they can actually be a nationwide candidate, right? They have to set up infrastructure, right? I mean, how would, if Niko, if you came off the street today and said you wanted to run for the Green Party of the United States for the, presidential nomination, I mean,
I would win it.
You would win it. You would. How would we know that you have any capability? And again, if you send in a letter of interest, a candidate questionnaire, and you file with the FEC, we consider you an active candidate, right? Just those three basic things, right?
But using me as an example, which I'm kind of glad you did, because it gives me a chance to I have an advantage, I think, compared to most people who have to build up their names, right, in that situation.
Sure.
So I would be able to raise the money. I would be able to leverage my following in the same way that the rules clearly benefited one candidate above literally all the other ones, because he was in a very similar situation to myself where he already had a platform coming in. So I just find it interesting, because I know the DNC has absolutely used its weight to force states to move in one direction or another when it comes to how they treat their candidates. So I don't understand. Does the Green Party not have any mechanisms to say, look, no. If we set these rules and criteria, you have to follow them. That's why we set them.
So again, we're decentralized, and states will make up their own choices as to who they want on the ballot. We provide, with the Presidential Campaign Support Committee, we provide a recommendation of what the states should have on the candidates that they should have there on the ballot. We say at least these officially recognized candidates, but also we have these active candidates as well, right? And California, they had a lot of the active candidates that were not officially recognized on the ballot. So,
I'm sorry, I got to push back a little bit on that.
Sure.
Yeah, because there's two things I want to push back on. One is the fact that if you literally have a special spot in your website for qualified candidates, and then all the other candidates are in a lower spot, and then you push all the candidates to the back infrastructure pages where public can't even really find them, they don't even know about that website. How are they ever going to meet the signature requirement? You wouldn't even know. It's completely ridiculous. I think you're literally deleting candidates out of the picture and then kind of arguing, well, you need to have a decent name recognition if you want to run with it at all. Howie Hawkins does not have a decent name recognition. He's well known in New York. There's a faction in the Green Party pushing him hard, and that's why he's getting so much of this external support. Preferred speaking slots. His team is being paid to literally send him all over the country by the Green Party sometimes. Dario Hunter talked about that at the Salem, Massachusetts thing. So that's one point I want to bring up. The second point I want to bring up is that this is kind of a lie the Green Party's telling. I hate to tell you this. I understand the Green Party wants to be decentralized, but if you look at the way that the Republican Party is running, they are saying, okay, states, you can run whoever you want. Larry Hogan, these other two people that are running. Yeah, Bill Weld, thank you. But we're not going to honor it. We're not going to honor it. The Republican Party is going Trump 110%. Have your little elections as states you could do so. We're going Trump. I kind of wish that if this was going to go this way, that we really couldn't get these Hawkins folks off of key committee spots. I wish you all just would have threw up your hands and said, you know what, the primary's canceled. There's nothing we could do. We can't kick these people that are in these committees off. We can't force them out. We can't recuse. We can't do anything with them. So let's just cancel the primary. Why are you telling us to waste my supporters' time in a rigged primary? Why are you telling me to waste my supporters' money just because you want me to have X of dollars that you and the Hawkins team settled on? I could go today and to Maryland.
Excuse me.
I'd have to get signatures. I don't have to raise money. This is completely absurd.
Okay, you weren't talking about me getting any money from the Hawkins campaign, right? I mean,
no, God, no,
okay.
no.
Okay.
No,
he's talking about some of the former campaign committee members.
I'm talking what Dario Hunter said at the Salem, Massachusetts debate, where he pointed out the fact that Andrea Merida was getting money from the National Green Party and at the exact same time from the Hawkins team in her dual capacity as co-chair of the Green Party and Hawkins campaign manager. Right then and there, it's an embarrassment to the Green Party that someone is an active co-chair and a campaign manager for Hawkins. The Democrats would flip their shit. Excuse me, I keep cursing on your show.
I don't give a shit about that, bro. It's
okay. There we go.
Go ahead.
Yeah. But for some reason, the Green Party's like, well, let's not really talk about that. Let's hide that in the back room. That's
I'm okay with talking about that.
So what's your response there, Justin?
No, I'm okay with talking about that. I felt for a long time that we need to have a conflict of interest policy across the board throughout all of our committees in the Green Party. But that is right. So the only committee that we have it for sure is the Presidential Campaign Support Committee. Love to see that throughout the rest of our committees. It's something I've lobbied for, but have not been successful in achieving. So I think after this nomination process, we definitely need to have an autopsy and really address some of these concerns that you raise. And you do raise many good concerns, Ian. I'd love for you to be a part of the process in making it better. I think the PCSC has failed in its communication to candidates about all the steps in the process, right? And also
okay, Justin, I do gotta step in for a second. I'm not gonna lie, Justin. That's some dribble that the DNC has sold us before. The miscommunication thing. I'm just being objective here because this is something. I was a surrogate for Tulsa's campaign too, and the whole miscommunication and lack of, we didn't give context or we didn't do enough. But I mean, if it's miscommunication isn't taking checks from both the Green Party itself and then Howie Hawkins in official capacities in both scenarios. So that's beyond miscommunication. And in fact, it should have been nipped in the bud. In my opinion, she probably should have been fired from one or both situations for engaging in such a conflict of interest. Wouldn't you agree with that? I feel like that's basic.
So I would agree with, again, all that you're saying about the conflict of interest. I'm saying that we did not communicate well enough what it means to be officially recognized, right? And we don't even have that as clearly defined as it should be. That's what I was talking about for miscommunication. I wasn't talking about conflict of interest or I thought there was a huge conflict of interest, right? With Andrea. And I think there still exists some conflicts of interest in other key committees, right? Luckily, the PCSC, we do have the conflict of interest. Again, it's something I've kind of railed against in some of these other committees. Why don't we have a conflict of interest statement policy here yet? It bothers me greatly. I think there's a lot we need to do to fix the party, but I don't think we're as horrible as we're being made out to be.
I don't think the Green Party itself is horrible, but I just feel like, once again, I'm just speaking as a person who I'm potentially voting Green in November, right? I have thousands and thousands of people who are talking to me about their concerns. So it's not just me speaking. I'm speaking from everything that I've heard over the last couple of weeks. I hear and have seen more excuses than I've heard about solutions. I think that's the biggest problem about this entire thing. Go ahead, Ian.
I just want to ask while you're here, Justin, I have to ask about the 2-month period. That's my count. 6 months was what 6 weeks was what officially we heard the co-chair of the PCS talk about, where the signatures just weren't counted. And then all of a sudden we get a request at that time that candidate will be kicked off the ballot for not getting enough signatures. I mean, could you talk to that at all? I mean, was there any kind of reprimand to the co-chair for not counting signatures for 6 weeks and not count 2 months?
Hold up, the same co-chair that was that was working for Howie's campaign?
No.
Oh, no. It's a different co-chair.
No, this is a PCSC. This is a PCSC co-chair. This is
Got
the
you.
PCSC
Understood.
co-chair.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify.
So,
Go ahead.
Presidential Campaign Support Committee co-chair, his name is John Andrews. And there's another co-chair, Sanda Everett, who's not that technically savvy, if you will. Basically, all of the processing of the donations and signatures was essentially going through John Andrews. Also, I would mention that another thing I was pushing for on the Presidential Campaign Support Committee is individual liaisons to candidates to improve communication when something would come up on the Presidential Campaign Support Committee. It could be shared with immediate liaisons to campaigns rather than just going through a committee co-chair, right? Which is essentially a bottleneck potentially. Anyways, that's just my opinion, right? In regards to the signatures and the gathering of signatures, collection of signatures, it definitely you have one person basically doing it all rather than delegating it to the rest of the committee. And I have given him feedback on that. I've recommended that he gets people to mentor under him so he could delegate some of those responsibilities. But yeah, absolutely, it was an issue, and I think that's another thing that we could do better in the future is, hey, how do we have those metrics kind of coming in, automatically updating a feed where it shows all the active candidates, all where they're at in the process, make it more real time. That would be fantastic. I mean, this is the first year we've had these Article 10 requirements, and in fact, those were put into place at the start of this nomination process, right? So, I mean, and again, we didn't have the clarification of what it meant to be officially recognized even yet, really clearly defined, or and we didn't communicate it well.
Got you. Okay, so I appreciate you taking the time to come on and explaining your side, and I appreciate Ian coming on to explain his frustration, and also honestly being representative of the frustrations of a lot of other party members. So I guess my only question before we head out is, will the Green Party start making some efforts to put it bluntly, not look like the Democratic Party? Like, can we count on you to explain our frustrations to this official committee and to some of the leaders, and to say, look, man, if we don't get right, we're not going to see what we saw in 2016, which is record-breaking registrations and record-breaking fundraising.
Is that a question to me?
That's a question for you. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, I appreciate you giving me the chance to join in this conversation, and Ian, I appreciate you for bringing up your frustrations and your critiques. Right. And I am definitely committed to raising issues. I would also say that I am up for re-election on the steering committee here. I don't know if I want to serve again, to be honest. And if I were to serve again, that in July. So that being said, I mean, I will continue to participate in the GPS structure to hopefully bring about positive change, whatever committees I participate in. I have not held my voice silent. I think you know me, Ian. You have not seen me on the GPUS. I know we've had conversations, but I think people on GPUS would basically say that I have actually raised some of these issues. I mean, if you talk to Gloria Matera, for instance, or Hillary, or some of the other steering committee members,
they're all welcome to come on the show. They're all welcome to come on.
But yeah, so I mean, I am very glad, and I really do want to bring these concerns forward. I've had my own concerns and reservations, and I brought them up. I'd just like to say this in the end here. I appreciate how this kind of started, right? Ian, you first of all, we had Howie Hawkins on Primo Nutmeg, and some concerns were raised about Howie Hawkins Russiagating, and there really isn't, it's like, it's being pushed for Howie. Now,
there's definitely some concerns with his rhetoric. There was definitely some concerns.
Oh, absolutely. And and then it went into like, what's, why are they just pushing Howie? I would say though, right, and I would look forward to actually talking with Primo Nutmeg as well. I've reached out to him a little bit right now, but he's only interviewed Howie Hawkins. He has not interviewed any of the other candidates, right, including Dario Hunter, the other front runner, right, and the other officially recognized candidate, David Rold, and there's 4 or 5 other active candidates right now. So the way right now only has been really covered there, right? And then Ian's concerns about the PCSC, and it really hasn't. Is it more about the Green Party candidates in this election cycle, or is it more about should we be concerned about the Green Party, right? So is there an agenda? I mean, granted, we do need to hear this story internally about the Green Party, and we do need to fix it. And I do appreciate Ian for bringing these concerns up, right? It gives me a chance to actually address them. But at the same time, I appreciate the reporting of Primo Nutmeg, right? I mean, he is very thorough, but without hearing from people like myself or the other candidates in this race, they're great candidates. David is great. Dario Hunter is great. Let the people hear from these rather than just fixate on Howie. Why aren't we also talking about it? I know you've had Dario on the show, and I appreciate that. I think the other candidates do need to be heard. So
hold up, Ian, you were a candidate too, right? You used to be
Ian
a candidate?
was a candidate as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'm having another one on tomorrow too, or maybe Tuesday. I gotta check, but yeah, don't worry. Everybody can say their piece here. It's MCSU Network.
Right. But yeah, let's hear about the candidates. Let's hear about what we can do here in this election cycle. But also, these comments, these critiques, absolutely, and frustrations, Ian, you're very valid to have them, and I appreciate you bringing them up, and it's fair.
Okay. And Ian, do you have anything to say before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I know this is going to sound a little strange, but I appreciate Justin for doing this. I think when you work closely within the Green Party, you have to understand that this is something that I personally struggled with, but I feel very strongly about the direction I've chosen. That there's a code of respectability. You don't want to besmirch the Green Party. But I think at the exact same time, I practice the saying of Amilcar Cabral, which is, hold no lies from your people, tell all the masses the truth. This is the kind of way we have to be. If we want to be a serious political party, we have to show that we're better than the Democratic Party. Not that we're doing a different kind of backroom shenanigans that maybe is on some backwards website. We have to show that we're upfront about this. And I just kind of end with this. I don't actually really blame you, Justin, per se. I think there is a systemic problem here where similar to the Democratic Party, where at the very end, folks wanted Bernie to go harder after Biden, but Bernie was friends with Biden and said, he's my good friend. I'm not going to go that hard after him. Similarly here, I think we really need to hear from Jill Stein. And, I love Jill Stein. She is a wonderful, wonderful, nicest person I ever met in politics. But if there's someone that could kind of put their foot on the pedal here in one way or another, I feel it's Jill. And I feel like we're really running a very rigged and unfair primary process. And we kind of need to, this isn't 2016. We can't just take the anger of the Democratic Party, swap Jill for Howie, and then say, oh, everything's fine here. Don't look behind the scenes. People are going to want to get involved. People got involved in the Democratic Party process. They got on their state committees. They held the Democratic Party accountable. If the Green Party wants to grow, you got to be held accountable. You can't be playing these kind of shenanigans behind the scenes. And so I think that I don't do this because I want to get out there and talk about the Green Party. I am very focused on revolutionary socialism right now. Day to day, I'm on the ground in Baltimore City, helping my mentor, Reverend Andy Chambers, hand out hot meals for people that can't shelter in place. That's what I do all day. But if someone calls me up and asks me to give a story about this, I'm going to tell the truth because it's all I know how to do. And I'm going to continue to tell the truth. And I think those in the party that would seek to kind of, put a respectability politics lens on this are going to destroy. We can't just swap one candidate for another. People are going to understand that we have a candidate who's in the front that's dead naming. We have a candidate in the front that has terrible positions on Syria. Get them alone privately, they got terrible positions on Venezuela and Cuba. And I feel like it is the fault of the party. If you want to vet candidates, vet them on the issue.
Wait a minute, hold up. You can't just slide that shit in there. Ian, you saying that Howie has terrible positions on Venezuela and Cuba too? Oh,
absolutely.
Baby
I said it on Primo Nutmeg, and I'll say it again.
Jesus.
This is what he said to me.
I got the vapors, y'all.
He's part of an organization called Solidarity. I think you should all look up Solidarity and their positions on different things. I think it'll be very enlightening.
So by the way, I've been calling for having other candidates besides Howie for interviews, right? I just said it here, right? Rather than giving a one-sided picture of our candidate, right? So I hope you think that I'm not being biased. I'd like to see more of our candidates talked about, right? To give their perspectives, and for people to see that there's not just the one candidate. Jimmy Dore will not have any of our candidates on right now because he can't stand Howie, and he thinks Dario blew him off, wasn't checking his email, right? So, what can we do? People are ignoring the Green Party, right? Ignoring the candidates. And you again bringing up some of these issues, Ian. But to be honest, right? You've been confusing official recognition with putting candidates on the ballot in states. Right?
I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. By the way, I feel like that's if you have to remember the actions that are taken by these. I know y'all don't. You're a decentralized organization, but when one state quite bluntly fucks up, it negatively reflects on the entire Green Party, and people will react accordingly. And
absolutely, we should take action against the Georgia Green Party, and I believe right, and perhaps we can something will be brought up in the credentialing process there. But again, official recognition does not mean they're guaranteed a spot on the ballot, right? And it so it's.
I understand what you're saying, but I have to just push back the notion of an official versus unofficial candidate to begin with. Not even the Democrats have that. If I go to my local Democratic ballot, I see names on there that only the Maryland Green Party put on, or only the Maryland Democratic Party put on because they filled out the forms in Maryland. I think it's completely ridiculous to have a two-tier candidate system to begin with. And I think the moment that the Hawkins team felt they could use this to their advantage, there should have been a lot more people with good head on their shoulders should have pushed back on the whole notion to begin with. I just don't feel that it's necessary to do this carte blanche. Like I really don't understand why we have two separate. It feels like a first class and a second class type of candidate. And I continue to maintain this. Someone reached out to me kind of on behalf of the PCSC, said, hey, we'll get you on as the third candidate. Now David Rold is the third candidate. That's fine. I like David. He's a great guy. Don't agree with everything he says, but I like him as a person, and I think he's got some good ideas. But anyway,
that sounds really strange.
But yeah, I could show you the text messages. So I think that this whole thing was sort of a setup. I think that there are people behind the scenes using the qualifications to benefit their own candidates. I think we're proving it today with what happened in North Carolina.
Ian, if you have some proof of that, could you please share it with me?
Okay, I think that's a conversation that we're gonna have off. We can have that one a little bit off camera.
If you're not.
All right, that sounds good. I appreciate both of you gentlemen coming on. I appreciate everybody keeping everything civil, and thank you for giving us some, background information on this situation, Justin and Ian. I really appreciate you, taking the time and telling us about your experiences and the experiences of other candidates. Now, just before we go, I do believe that we should, by the way, for everybody else watching, we should not try and paint the Green Party with a broad brush. This is still the Green Party of Jill Stein and Jamal Baraka, right? Yeah, there may be some people right now in power in particular states that may be operating under a illegitimate pretense, if you will. But with that being said, you can also get your ass up and go run for a damn chair position in any of these parties and go do something about it yourself. So
yes.
if you
come on in.
Now we start seeing some problems with that. Like we start seeing some Keith Ellison, Kimberly Ellis shit, where now we're getting delegate corruption. Now that's a whole different discussion for a different day. But first, stop waiting for somebody else to try to fix things. 2, try to fix it yourself. And 3, hold them accountable just like you would hold anybody else accountable. But as long as the Green Party doesn't start calling people Russian-phobes, or excuse me, Russian assets, then I think we might still be okay come November. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning into that live stream segment of Mikai Says Sukasa. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance.